The air inside the rooms we build for ourselves does not circulate anymore, it vibrates. If we sit entirely still in the heart of any modern city, beneath the superficial noise of traffic and conversation, we can hear a deeper, more pervasive hum. It is the low-frequency drone of server racks cooling millions of terabytes of human anxiety. It is the sharp, metallic click of keyless entry pads locking us into spaces we bought with our health. It is the frantic, intermittent vibration of smartphones resting against glass desks, sending microshocks of adrenaline directly through our wrists and into our central nervous system. We live in an architectural marvel of our own making, a world constructed of steel, glass, and fiber optic cables, yet we are suffocating within it. We have managed to banish the dark by installing perpetual artificial daylight, but in doing so, we have also banished the natural intervals of rest that every living organism requires to survive. Outside our windows, the natural world is engaged in an ancient, effortless choreography. The trees do not force their sap upward in the dead of winter. They wait, rooted in the cold earth, conserving their vital essence until the tilt of the planet invites the blossom. The rivers do not sprint toward the ocean out of a fear of being late. They carve their canyons with a patient, unhurried density, navigating obstacles through the simple law of gravity and flow. But we have severed our connection to these rhythms. We have convinced ourselves that we are separate from the ecosystem, that we are machines capable of infinite expansion, endless optimization, and constant growth. We treat our lives not as an unfolding mystery to be experienced, but as a software system that needs an immediate patch, an urgent upgrade, a more efficient algorithm. We do not actually inhabit the spaces we occupy, we merely pass through them on our way to somewhere else. We sit in high-stakes boardrooms or quiet coffee shops, our bodies physically resting on chairs, but our minds are already sprinting down the hallway of the next hour. We look at our calendars not as a tool for organization, but as a battle map, each color-coded block representing a territory of time we must conquer and subdue. Even when we are granted the rare luxury of a pause, when the work is finished and the house is quiet, we do not know how to land within our own skin. We stand in front of open refrigerators without hunger, our eyes scanning the shelves for a dopamine hit. We pick up our devices before our eyes are even fully open in the morning, drowning our waking consciousness in the opinions, achievements, and catastrophes of strangers before we have even checked the temperature of our own breath. We slide into our beds at night, with our minds still spinning at 10,000 revolutions per minute. Our brains desperately trying to resolve the unfinished narratives of the day, while our muscles remain locked in a defensive posture. We have become a civilization of forward-leaning ghosts. Our torsos perpetually tilted toward the future, our weight thrown entirely into the next moment, leaving the present completely empty. This state of perpetual becoming has created a profound psychological phenomenon that dictates every decision we make. The illusion of the shifting horizon line. We tell ourselves a beautiful, seductive lie every single morning. We say that if we can just get through this specific project, if we can just secure this particular promotion, if we can just cross this financial threshold or reach this level of physical fitness, then we will finally permit ourselves to rest. We paint a vivid mental picture of a future sanctuary where we will be allowed to be happy, peaceful, and content. But when we finally arrive at that long-sought destination, the horizon line does not stay where it was. It quietly, ruthlessly moves 5 miles further down the road. The promotion brings a heavier weight of responsibility. The financial milestone reveals a new tier of lack. The physical achievement only highlights the inevitability of aging. The mind, conditioned by years of restless striving, cannot suddenly switch to a frequency of contentment. It immediately identifies a new deficiency, constructs a new ideal, and demands that we begin running again. We are like horses chasing a carrot suspended from a stick tied to our own harness, running faster and faster, completely blind to the fact that the distance between our mouths and our desires is fixed by our own internal machinery. We are burning our vital energy to buy a ticket to an event that does not exist. The price we pay for this endless pursuit is not merely mental, it is written directly into the tissues, fibers, and fluids of our physical bodies. Because the mind is convinced that survival is always contingent on what happens next, it sends a continuous, low-grade distress signal to the nervous system. We walk through our office buildings and supermarkets with our shoulders subtly elevated toward our ears, an ancient evolutionary response designed to protect the jugular vein from a predator that no longer exists. We hold our breath for 10, 15, 20 seconds at a time while reading an email, a phenomenon so common it has become our collective signature. Our breathing becomes shallow and restricted, confined entirely to the upper chest, utilizing only a fraction of our lung capacity. This shallow breath signals to the brain that we are in a state of crisis, which in turn accelerates the heart rate, tightens the muscles, and floods the bloodstream with cortisol. Our jaws are clenched so tightly during the day that the muscles of the face ache by nightfall, acting as a physical dam, holding back a reservoir of unspoken exhaustion and unexpressed grief. We are physically armored against our own life, treating the present moment as an adversary that must be overcome, rather than the only ground upon which we can truly stand. We are exhausted not because we are doing too much, but because we are resisting what is, living in a state of constant internal friction against the reality of our current existence. We look at our reflections in the mirror and we see the lines of strain around our eyes, the tightness in our mouths, the fatigue that seems to have settled deep within our bones, yet our immediate response is to seek another method of self-improvement. We buy books on sleep optimization, we download apps to measure our meditation statistics, we purchase supplements to boost our cognitive performance, converting the very tools of liberation into new tasks on our endless to-do lists. We have transformed the spiritual quest for peace into another competitive sport, another metric by which to judge our worthiness. We are caught in a tragic loop. We try to cure the sickness of striving by striving to be better at not striving. We cannot see that the very hand trying to untie the knot is the hand that is pulling the string tight. We are terrified of stopping because we suspect that if we cease our forward motion, if we drop our projects and our identities for even a single day, we will be forced to confront the vast, hollow space that resides beneath our productivity. We fear that without our achievements, without our busyness, without our constant upgrading, we might discover that we are fundamentally empty, that we are not enough, and that our existence has no meaning. And so we keep running, turning the wheels of our life faster and faster, hoping that the roar of the engine will drown out the quiet, terrifying whisper of our own soul demanding to be met right here, right now, exactly as we are. To understand how deeply this mechanical sickness has metastasized within our collective psychology, we must look at those among us who have mastered the art of the forward lean, those who embody the absolute pinnacle of modern optimization. Consider a person who has spent their entire existence building an unassailable fortress of competence, a high-performing architect of their own destiny, who moves through the world with an air of absolute precision. From the outside, their life looks like a masterclass in human potential. They possess the material markers of security, the respect of their peers, the unshakable title, and the digital footprint that projects an image of effortless balance. They are the ones who cross the finish line first, who anticipate crises before they occur, and who pride themselves on being the anchor for everyone else in their orbit. They have turned self-discipline into a religion and efficiency into their highest sacrament. But if we pull back the velvet curtain of this flawless exterior and step into the private theatre of their solitary hours, we discover an entirely different architecture. We find a structure built on shifting sand, sustained only by the desperate, continuous investment of their remaining vital force. This individual is not living. They are managing an enterprise called their life, and the cost of maintenance is eating them alive from the inside out. The reality of this high-performing existence is a silent daily warfare waged against the messages of the physical body. When this person sits alone at their desk late into the evening, after the notifications have slowed and the world has gone quiet, the physical bill for their relentless becoming is delivered straight to their tissues. The most immediate battlefield is the temporomandibular joint, the hinge of the jaw. Throughout the day, as they force their way through difficult conversations, navigate systemic pressures, and suppress their own rising irritation, the jaw becomes a vice. They grind their teeth in their sleep, waking up with a dull, radiating ache in their temples. A physical manifestation of a mind that refuses to let go even when unconscious. The jaw is the physical dam of the modern human. It is where we trap our unspoken exhaustion, where we bite down on our fear of failure, and where we lock away the primal urge to simply scream that we cannot do this anymore. This tightness is not an isolated mechanical flaw. It is a neurological signal that travels downward, anchoring itself into the trapezius muscles and the cervical spine. The shoulders are permanently hiked, frozen in a perpetual shrug of defensive anticipation, as if they are physically carrying the weight of an entire organization, a family, or an idealized reputation. The upper back becomes a sheet of living armor, cold, dense, and unyielding to the touch. If we drop our awareness even deeper into the core of this archetype, past the armored chest and the shallow lungs, we encounter the true center of modern suffering. The enteric nervous system, the intricate web of nerves wrapping around the gut. In this high-performing individual, the belly is never soft. It is a knot of constant, low-grade apprehension, a tight fist of muscles that treats every incoming piece of data as a potential threat to survival. This chronic contraction destroys the body's ability to perform its most fundamental task: digestion. We do not just digest food, we digest our experiences, our emotions, and our relationships. When the gut is locked in a state of survival-driven tension, life cannot be processed. Conversations remain stuck in the throat. Unexpressed grief sits like a heavy stone in the stomach. And the beauty of the present moment passes through the body without ever being absorbed. This person can consume the finest organic meals, drink the purest water, and practice the most advanced wellness routines. But their tissues remain starved for nourishment because their internal environment is locked in a state of siege. They are trapped in a physical prison where every muscle group is screaming for a ceasefire, yet the mind, acting as a tyrannical commander, refuses to grant it. This entire human system operates exactly like an overwound mechanical clock, a beautiful piece of classical engineering gone horribly wrong. Inside this clockwork mind, the components are made of the highest grade steel, the gears are perfectly cut, and the jewels are polished to a brilliant sheen. The key of ambition has been inserted into the mainspring, and it has been turned with immense force, rotation after rotation, tightening the coil until there is absolutely no space left between the layers of metal. The spring is stored with a terrifying density of potential energy, a pressure that demands to be released through constant ticking, constant motion, and constant work. To the external observer, the clock appears to be functioning beautifully. It ticks with a sharp, authoritative cadence, its hands sweep across the face with absolute certainty, and it is always ahead of schedule. The individual takes immense pride in this speed, misinterpreting the fast pace of their mind as a sign of intellectual superiority and superior adaptation. They believe that because they are moving faster than those around them, They are winning the race against time itself. But they are blind to the basic physics of their own internal mechanism. Because the mainspring is wound so tightly, the friction between the gears is generating an immense, destructive heat. The delicate oil that was meant to lubricate the movements is drying up, turning into a sticky, abrasive sludge. The metal teeth of the wheels are grinding directly against one another, throwing off microscopic shards of dust that clog the delicate escapement. Every tick of this overwound clock requires an immense expenditure of raw force, a desperate output of energy that is slowly but surely fatiguing the metal itself. The clock is running fast not because it is efficient, but because it is out of control, rushing headlong toward its own mechanical failure. The internal jewels, designed to withstand normal wear, are being crushed under the unnatural pressure of the spring. The individual feels this internal grinding as a sense of structural brittleness they feel, as though they are one minor inconvenience, one delayed flight, or one critical comment away from a total internal collapse. They cannot slow down the ticking because the tension in the spring is too high. They are at the mercy of a movement they initiated, but can no longer control. The tragedy of this mechanical existence is that it treats life as an obstacle to be cleared rather than a reality to be entered. When this high-performing archetype looks at a sunset, they do not see a breathtaking display of cosmic impermanence. They see a sunset that needs to be photographed and catalogued as evidence of a well-lived life. When they spend time with their children, they are not present to the messy, unpredictable magic of childhood. They are evaluating their performance as a parent, wondering if they are investing enough resources into the child's future competitiveness. Every encounter is instrumentalized, stripped of its inherent value, and converted into a stepping stone for a future that never arrives. The mechanical clock cannot appreciate the music it accompanies. It can only measure the duration of the notes. In the same way, the optimized mind cannot taste the flavor of life. It can only calculate the calories, the efficiency, and the yield of its efforts. It is a life lived in exile from the senses, a ghost haunting a machine, running on the fuel of adrenaline and the fear of what will happen when the spring finally snaps and the ticking stops forever. Into this chamber of grinding gears and mechanical exhaustion, a different voice enters. It is not the voice of a modern consultant offering a new technique for time management, nor is it the voice of a critic demanding greater effort. It is the voice of an ancient physician of the soul, one who sat beneath the roots of a tree in the northern plains of India and looked deeply into the very same friction that consumes us today. The diagnosis he offers is razor-sharp, cutting through the layers of our sophisticated self-justifications like a surgeon's blade through diseased tissue. He looks at our frantic attempts to optimize, to upgrade, and to perpetually become something else. And he points to the foundational error that sets the entire mechanism in motion. We are suffering, he tells us, not because our tools are inefficient, and not because we have failed to work hard enough. We are suffering because we are trying to force a fluid, ever-changing reality into a permanent mechanical mold. We have built an entire identity based on a profound illusion, the illusion of the permanent self-project. We treat ourselves as if we are a product that must be continuously edited, marketed, and improved. We assume that there is a static, separate entity called the self that stands outside of life, managing it, controlling it, and bearing the responsibility for its ultimate success or failure. But when we use the knife of direct awareness to examine this manager, this entity we protect so fiercely, we find something astonishing. We find that it cannot be located. If we look closely at our thoughts, we see they are like passing clouds, arising from nowhere, staying for a brief moment, and dissolving back into the sky. If we look at our emotions, we find they are weather patterns, shifting with the wind of circumstance. If we look at our physical cells, We see they are a river of dying and reborn tissue, completely different from the cells we possessed a decade ago. There is no permanent engineer sitting inside the clock. There is only a dynamic stream of conditions, an interconnected web of causes and effects that is entirely inseparable from the universe around it. The tragedy of our striving is that we are trying to upgrade a ghost. We are exhausting our bodies to build a monument to an identity that is nothing more than a conceptual shadow. This illusion becomes a weapon of self-destruction when we encounter the inevitable friction of life, a dynamic explained through the ancient teaching of the two arrows. Imagine a traveler walking through an open field when a sudden storm brings a stray arrow flying through the air, piercing their flesh. The pain is sharp, immediate, and real. This first arrow represents the unavoidable realities of being alive in a physical world. It is the natural fatigue of a body that has limits. It is the unexpected shift in the market that ruins a business plan. It is the natural aging of our parents. It is the rain that falls on the day we planned an outdoor celebration. These are the arrivals of change, the fundamental truth that life is not a clock that can be programmed to run in a single direction. No amount of optimization can protect us from the first arrow. It is the price of admission to the human experience. But the ordinary mind does not simply experience the first arrow and tend to the wound. Instead, it stands over itself in a state of frantic rage and unleashes a second arrow, aiming it directly at the very same spot. The second arrow is our mental reaction to the first. It is the internal voice that begins to scream that we should not be tired, that if we were stronger or smarter this would not have happened, that we are falling behind our peers, and that our fatigue is proof of our fundamental inadequacy. The first arrow causes physical pain. The second arrow creates psychological suffering. The first arrow is an event. The second arrow is a trial where we act as the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner of our own soul. We shoot ourselves with the second arrow thousands of times a day, converting a moment of natural limitation into a lifetime of unworthiness. We do not suffer because we are tired. We suffer because we believe that being tired is a moral failure. Consider how this plays out in the mind of our high-performing architect when a project faces an unexpected delay. The first arrow is the delay itself, a neutral fact born of 100 moving parts beyond any single person's control. But within a fraction of a second, the mechanical mind fires the second arrow. It spins a narrative of impending ruin. This means you are losing your edge. People will realize you are an imposter. If you let this slip, everything you have built will crumble. This narrative triggers the physical response we mapped earlier: the locked jaw, the frozen shoulders, the burning gut. The body does not know the difference between a real predator and a terrifying mental projection. It responds to the thoughts as if they are a physical threat to its existence. We are literally poisoning our own bloodstream with stress hormones, not because of what is happening in reality, but because of the commentary we are running about reality. We have become our own torturers, using the key of self-criticism to wind the spring of our tension tighter and tighter until the metal is screaming under the strain. The root of this self-inflicted violence is a profound resistance to the law of impermanence, the reality that all constructed things must change, dissolve, and pass away. The mechanical mind craves a static world. It wants to reach a certain plateau of success and freeze it in time, holding on to it like a photograph. It treats its goals as fixed points on a map, refusing to acknowledge that the landscape itself is a living, shifting ocean. When reality does not match our mental blueprints, we experience the friction of unfulfilled desire. We do not adapt to the river, we try to build a concrete wall across it, and then we wonder why the water beats against us with such terrifying violence. We are fighting a war against the cosmos, demanding that the universe conform to our schedules, our expectations, and our desires for perpetual growth. It is a war we are guaranteed to lose, and the casualties of this war are our health, our sanity, and our capacity for joy. Let us pause in this realization. Let us let the weight of this understanding settle into the spaces between our thoughts. If we look honestly at the landscape of our lives, we can see the thousands of second arrows we have fired into our own hearts. We can see the sheer absurdity of trying to optimize a self that is as fluid as water. We can feel the heat generated by the friction of our resistance. The realization is not meant to discourage us. It is the beginning of our liberation. To see the illusion as an illusion is already to be awake to the truth. When we realize that we are the ones holding the winding key, we realize that we also possess the power to let it go. We do not need to find a new way to fix ourselves, because the very idea that we are broken is the original illusion that started the engine of our exhaustion. We are not a machine that needs to be repaired. We are a living process that needs to be allowed to flow, to rest, and to simply be, grounded in the unshakable reality of the present moment. To step out of this relentless machinery of becoming, we do not need to acquire a new skill, nor do we need to embark on a new campaign of self-betterment. The way out is not a forward leap, it is a profound, intentional yielding. It is the art of returning the key to the mainspring and allowing the overwound mechanism of the mind to unwind at its own pace, without interference, without judgment, and without the desire for a specific result. This is not a passive collapse into laziness, nor is it a surrender to defeat. It is a highly disciplined act of radical non-interference. It is the realization that the most courageous thing we can do in a world that profits from our distraction is to stand entirely still and refuse to pull the string of our own lives any tighter. The practice begins the moment we notice the hand of ambition reaching for the winding key. Throughout our day, there are thousands of micro-moments where the mind attempts to leave the present space to secure a footing in the next hour. We might be sitting at our desk, walking down a corridor, or waiting for a digital file to download. In those precise gaps, the old conditioning will manifest as a subtle, creeping anxiety, a feeling that we should be doing something else, checking a notification, updating a plan, or reviewing a past conversation. This is the critical juncture. Instead of following that impulse, we learn to recognize it as a mechanical reflex, a twitch of the overwound spring. We do not fight the impulse, we do not criticize ourselves for having it, and we do not try to suppress it. We simply observe it with a spacious, non-judgmental curiosity. We say to ourselves internally, with immense gentleness, "Ah, there is the winding key again." There is the mind trying to lean forward into a future that does not exist. The moment we see the mechanism operating, its hypnotic power over us begins to dissolve. We are no longer the machine, we are the space in which the machine is running. From this mental observation, we immediately transfer our attention downward into the direct raw reality of the physical body. We use the somatic architecture as an anchor to pull our awareness out of the conceptual clouds and drop it back onto the solid earth. We begin with the most immediate site of physical friction, the jaw. Right now, wherever we are, we can bring our attention to the hinges of our mouth. We check if the upper and lower teeth are pressed against each other. We check if the root of the tongue is thick and rigid against the roof of the mouth. With an intentional act of kindness toward our own flesh, we allow the lower jaw to drop slightly, creating a tiny, millimeter-wide space of air between the molars. We let the tongue soften, resting heavily in the floor of the mouth. As the jaw releases, we feel a wave of relaxation travel upward into the small muscles around the eyes, smoothing the micro-tensions in the brow, allowing the face to shed the mask of the competent professional and return to its natural neutral form. Next, we shift our awareness to the heavy plates of the upper shoulders and the cervical spine. We do not try to force the shoulders down with a rigid military posture, as that would only introduce a new form of tension. Instead, we simply breathe into them, allowing our awareness to flood the tight fibers of the trapezius muscles. On the exhalation, we imagine the shoulders melting downward like ice turning to water under a warm sun. We let them hang heavily from the frame of the skeleton, trusting that the bones of the spine and the rib cage are fully capable of supporting our weight without the need for muscular armor. We feel the shoulder blades sliding down the back, opening up a sense of space around the throat and the neck, allowing the breath to move without encountering a physical wall. From the unburdened shoulders, we descend into the deeper sanctuary of the lower abdomen. We look at how we have held our belly tight to project an image of strength or fitness, or out of a subconscious fear of vulnerability. We deliberately give up this control. We let the abdominal wall go completely soft. We let the belly expand outward, dropping the diaphragm downward into the pelvic bowl. When we breathe in now, we do not pull the air into the narrow, frantic chambers of the upper chest. We allow the inhalation to drop all the way down into the soft space of the stomach, feeling the abdomen rise like a gentle wave, expanding laterally into the lower back and the hips. When we breathe out, we do not force the air out, we simply let it go, allowing the breath to leave the body as a natural deflation, carrying with it the microscopic residues of accumulated stress. Through this deep abdominal breathing, we are directly communicating with our autonomic nervous system. We are sending a physical signal to the old brain that there is no predator in this room, no crisis that needs immediate resolution, and no emergency that justifies the destruction of our health. We are proving to the body, through the currency of our breath, that it is safe to arrive completely in this single moment. As we stabilize this physical softness, our internal imagery undergoes a fundamental transformation. We consciously choose to abandon the metaphor of the mechanical clock, the cold steel, the rigid gears, the frantic, measured ticking that treats time as a scarce commodity to be used up. In its place, we invite the living presence of an ancient banyan tree standing in the center of a vast forest. Consider the architecture of this tree. It is immensely powerful, capable of sheltering hundreds of living creatures beneath its canopy, yet its power is completely devoid of striving. The tree does not wake up in the morning with a plan to optimize its leaf production. It does not look at the neighboring trees with a sense of comparison or imposter syndrome, wondering if its branches are growing fast enough or if its bark is sufficiently impressive. It does not lean toward the next season, trying to force the fruit of summer to appear during the frost of winter. The banyan tree exists by an entirely different logic, the logic of organic alignment. It simply rests deeply in its roots, sinking them further into the dark, nourishing earth, absorbing the minerals and moisture that are already present in its immediate environment. It extends its leaves to receive the light of the sun, transmuting that light into vital energy through an effortless, silent alchemy. When the wind blows, the tree does not stand in a state of rigid, brittle resistance. Its branches flex and sway, riding the movement of the storm without breaking, allowing the air to pass through its canopy. When the winter comes, it drops its leaves without a sense of grief or failure, entering a state of quiet, restorative stillness, knowing with an absolute cellular certainty that the cycle of life will bring the warmth of spring in its own time. The growth of the tree is not a task it performs, it is an expression of what it is. We can bring this banyan tree consciousness into the very heart of our modern workspace. When we sit in front of our computer screen, facing an avalanche of incoming data, we can imagine our lower body or feet on the floor, our thighs on the chair as the massive, unshakable root system of the tree. Let the weight of the torso settle heavily into the seat, feeling the gravitational pull of the earth welcoming our presence. Let the spine rise out of this heavy base like a strong, flexible trunk, elegant and upright, but completely free of stiffness. As we read the emails and navigate the demands of our peers, we let those pieces of information pass through our awareness, like the wind blowing through the leaves of our canopy. The emails are just the wind. They do not have the power to uproot us unless we choose to make ourselves rigid. We can respond to the demands with an absolute precision, writing the necessary words and making the required decisions, but we do so from the silent, immovable center of our roots rather than the frantic, shaking tips of our branches. We are no longer trying to become a successful person. We are allowing our natural intelligence to express itself through the medium of our work, without the internal friction of the second arrow. This practice requires an unyielding, internal discipline, but it is a discipline of subtraction rather than addition. It is the discipline of continually letting go of the burden of the next moment. Every time we catch the mind formulating a blueprint for how we will be happy later, we gently but firmly delete the blueprint and return to the texture of what is happening now. If we are drinking a cup of tea, we do not use the tea as a lubricant to help us plan a strategy. We feel the warmth of the ceramic against our palms, the aroma of the leaves rising into our nostrils, the wetness of the fluid on our tongue. If we are speaking to a colleague, we do not listen to them while simultaneously editing our response or calculating how this conversation fits into our career trajectory. We listen to the tone of their voice, the expression in their eyes, receiving their presence as the only reality that matters in this universe. We treat the present moment not as an obstacle to be cleared on the way to a destination, but as the destination itself, the only space where we can truly live, love, create, and be free. We stop running on the treadmill of perpetual becoming, and we step off into the boundless, untamed landscape of being. When the frantic ticking of the internal mechanism finally begins to subside, when the mainspring is allowed to fully unwind and stretch into its natural, unburdened form, a profound shift occurs in the very texture of our existence. We do not disappear, nor do we lose our capacity to act, build, or create in the physical world. Instead, we discover a state of consciousness that has been hidden beneath our busyness for decades, the timeless ground of radical presence. This is the unshakable clarity of an open sky, a vast and luminous space of awareness that remains completely unaffected by the weather patterns passing through it. In this state, we no longer look at the world through the narrow lens of what we can extract from it, nor do we evaluate our days based on how much we have optimized our potential. We move with a quiet, grounded majesty, embodying a sense of absolute completion that requires no future milestone to validate its worth. In this newfound clarity, the illusion of the permanent self-project simply evaporates. We look in the mirror, and we no longer see an enterprise that needs to be aggressively managed, or an asset that must be constantly upgraded. We see a living, breathing expression of the universe, a beautiful and fluid process that is entirely inseparable from the wind, the rain, and the turning of the earth. We realize that the true power of a human being does not reside in perpetual motion, nor does it belong to the one who can run the fastest toward an ever-shifting horizon line. True power belongs to the one who can sit entirely still in the middle of a raging storm and remain completely anchored in the reality of what is. It is the power of the immovable center, a presence so deep and spacious that it can receive the first arrows of life fatigue, the loss, the unexpected changes with an open heart, while completely refusing to fire the second arrows of self-judgment and existential panic. This was the ultimate transmission of the ancient teacher before he closed his eyes and dissolved into the final stillness beneath the twin trees of Kusinara. In his final hours, as his disciples gathered around him weeping for the loss of their guide, he did not offer them a complex metaphysical theory or a new set of instructions to follow. He simply reminded them of the fundamental nature of reality, whispering that all constructed things, All networks of conditions, all clocks we wind with our desires, are inherently subject to decay and dissolution. They are like mist on a morning river, beautiful for a passing moment, but completely impossible to hold on to. His final command was not an invitation to strive harder, but a call to absolute self-reliance and immediate awakening. To be a lamp unto ourselves, to seek no external refuge, and to find our liberation right here, in the unconditioned ground of our own direct experience. He was reminding us that the freedom we are running so hard to find in the future is already sitting quietly inside the very breath we are taking right now. When we live from this space, the entire world transforms around us. The low-frequency hum of the modern city no longer feels like a prison walls, it becomes just another sound arising and falling in the vast expanse of our listening. We can walk into high-stakes boardrooms, step onto crowded subway cars, or sit down at our digital desks without locking our jaws, without freezing our shoulders, and without knotting our stomachs. We work, we build businesses, we care for our families, and we create art, but we do it all as a joyful play of energy rather than a desperate struggle for survival. We are no longer trying to bridge the gap between who we are and who we think we should be. We have fallen radically in love with the raw, unfiltered reality of who we are in this immediate instant. We have returned the key to the clockmaker, stepped out of the mechanical gears of psychological time, and entered the boundless, sacred reservoir of the eternal present. The heavy, suffocating cloak of our perpetual becoming has been dropped onto the forest floor, and we are finally free to walk lightly upon the earth. The air tastes sweeter when we are not using it to fuel our next sprint. The voices of our loved ones sound richer when we are not listening to them through the filter of our schedules. The simple act of being alive becomes a source of quiet, causeless joy that cannot be quantified by any modern metric. We have arrived home, not because we have finally reached the shifting horizon line, but because we have had the immense courage to stop running. As you sit here in the quiet aftermath of this journey, feeling the natural rise and fall of your soft chest, the spaciousness behind your eyes, and the cool touch of the air on your skin, the mechanical world continues to roar outside your door, demanding that you begin winding your spring once again. The old pathways of comparison, anxiety, and restless ambition are still etched into the brain, waiting for you to step back onto their treadmill. But you have seen the illusion for what it is, and that sight cannot be unseen. The choice to step into the future or to land on the earth belongs entirely to you in every unfolding moment. If you were to completely drop the burden of who you are supposed to become in the next hour, who are you right now, in the vast expanse of this single breath?